NATO has made an earth-shattering announcement about member countries' defense spending. But why? Why did this happen? I'm Steve Sandford, you're watching Dominion Report. NATO's announcement was for a staggering 5% of GDP for member countries to spend on defense. And for Canada, that means nearly quadrupling our defense budget to $150 billion. Scaremongering news reports have been flying around Canada's internet ever since. Now, I have a video where I break down that number and I provide a whole bunch of context. And so if you haven't seen that one, you probably want to watch it first and then come back to this one. I'll put a link to that video up here in the corner of the screen as well as into the comments. NATO has historically requested a defense spend of 2% of GDP for each member country. And last year, 23 of the 32 countries actually spent at least 2%. In fact, on average, NATO countries spent 2.7% of GDP. And some of the biggest spenders, coincidentally or not, are the ones next to Russia. So Poland, Estonia, and Latvia fall into that category. And of course, also the US is one of the highest spenders. They're actually third. They spend about 3.4% of their GDP. And yet, now, all but one NATO country have suddenly agreed to spend 5%. So what happened? The answer is Donald Trump happened. That's right. The NATO leaders were gathered recently in The Hague, and they wanted to discuss Iran-Israel, they wanted to discuss Ukraine-Russia, and then Donald Trump came in and he wanted to take all the attention for himself, and so he threw out his demand that every country spend 5% of their GDP on defense. This is a very aggressive demand. Many would consider it an unrealistic demand, and some would perhaps even say impossible. One of the things that Donald Trump probably didn't expect was for the NATO leaders to say, sure thing, Donald, let's all spend 5%. And they went ahead and they made a big announcement. And some of them lavished all kinds of praise on Trump for being a visionary, for being persuasive, for being good at deal making, or whatever they could think of to make him feel like he was a big boy. Now, this actually happened on the back of an EU meeting where Canada and the EU together signed security and trade agreements, including the newly created Rearm Europe program, which is apparently worth a reported $1.2 trillion. So a number of the NATO countries had already announced increased defense spending, so I guess they could tie that into this and announce it again. Then it became clear that a portion of the new defense spending would go toward defense infrastructure. Now, I explained in the other video how this is pretty much just infrastructure, and it probably falls under the category of we were going to spend this money anyway. But here's the really big kicker in all of this. The lofty 5% goal is to be achieved by 2035. That's 10 years away. Donald Trump is 79 years old, and he doesn't appear to be in the best of health. So whether or not the United States ever has elections again is probably still an open question, but either way, it's highly unlikely that Trump will still be president in 10 years from now. Even if he is still alive, all of the clear signs of dementia suggest that he probably won't remember what NATO is, let alone that agreement at that meeting back in The Hague way back in 2025. NATO leaders know this, and most of them won't be leaders of their countries in 2035. I can almost promise you that they did this to undermine Trump's complaints, to undermine his victimhood claims that countries take advantage of the United States, and to stifle his attention-seeking behavior. And they did it in such a way that they could combine it with compliments, leaving Trump feeling like he is the smartest guy in the room, even though the rest of us can pretty much see right through all of this. This is like when the tantrum-prone toddler is at the store with his mom and decides that he really wants that specific toy. So mom says, sure, Billy, you can have the toy, and she buys it. And she knows that by the time they get home, Billy will have completely forgotten about the toy, and she can just return it to the store the next day. Try to imagine you have been elected leader of a NATO country, and this is what you have to deal with. At any rate, if you notice scaremongering headlines about Canada quadrupling its defense budget. For all the reasons I explained in the previous video, and for this one big fat reason that I just outlined here, I don't think you need to worry too much. Friends, we're building a great little community here, and I'm really enjoying interacting with you all in the comments. So please go ahead and subscribe for more content, and please keep those comments coming.